The Bring a Trailer Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer Podcast. Alex coming to you today from San Francisco, but joined by the one and only Boris Said from Murrieta, California, in your BMW dealership. That's right, Boris?
Yep, that's right. GN6 will be 14 years in business, so I'm pretty proud of that. You know, I had a long racing career with BMW, and one thing led to another, and they awarded me an open point. So I've been selling cars since I quit racing, so it's fun.
That's not bad. We're in that business here, too, at Bring a Trailer. You're selling the full gamut of BMWs. Do you specialize in any specific kind of BMW?
No, we sell them all. You know, we have a lot of used cars from all different manufacturers, but, you know, BMW is a great product line and does pretty good. I also have a Volkswagen store across the street, so we have two here.
And what are you doing from your office there? You're ordering people around, dressing down your employees, or
oh, yeah, just a total tyrant. No, I'm more like the janitor here. I paint and clean the bathrooms, clean everything. You know, just try to keep all the balls in the air.
That's fantastic. Do you sell BMW motorcycles too, or is that a separate thing? I know you're a motorcycle guy.
That's a separate franchise. We don't do that. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a Honda Yamaha franchise dealer when I was 21. So that seems like a past life ago before racing. But
you still like bikes, right? And you were kind of a bike guy before a car guy. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up riding dirt bikes and racing motocross, and still I love to ride today. I have a bunch of KTMs, and I just bought an old 81 Kawasaki KX250 on Bring a Trailer, a 2001 KX250 on Bring a Trailer. So, yeah.
Everything's 4-strokes now, but you were a 2-stroke guy back in the day, right?
Yeah, and all my dirt bikes are 2-strokes. Yeah. I don't like 4-strokes. I like the noise. I like the smell.
100%. 100%. There's great riding out there in the kind of eastern part of Southern California. Is that where you're doing most of your riding?
I have a house in Utah, in Heber City, up in the mountains at about 8,000 feet. And it's more for snowmobiling and riding dirt bikes and riding razors. And I love it out there. So we do most of the riding out there.
That doesn't sound like a bad life, man. I'd be happy to do something like that. I grew up actually out in Ridgecrest, California, out in the kind of eastern part of Kern County. So
cool.
a lot of bike riding out there, Jawbone Canyon, all that stuff.
Yep.
So flashing back to early days, is it motorcycles that got you interested in racing?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up just racing dirt bikes and motocross, and ended up when I was 14, I was working in a bike dealership, putting bikes together. And then, you know, one thing led to another. I worked in parts, became the parts manager, then the general manager. And then when I was 21, I ended up buying my own store. And to that point, it was just about bikes, you know, and a friend that helped me get approved for my bike dealership owned a Ford dealership. And his son was a motocross racer. And I knew him, his name was John McLean, on McLean Ford in Stamford, Connecticut. And I was 21 years old, so I couldn't get approved for the financing line. I needed to floor plan the bikes. So he became like this fake partner. Back then, it was real easy to do stuff like that. And just say he was a partner, and they approved me. And for doing that, I gave him a couple dirt bikes. And it was about a year later, he goes, hey, I have this Ford dealer trip to a car race in Detroit, a Formula One race. You should go. So everything's paid for. It's first class. It'd be a blast. And I'm like, car racing's stupid. I don't want anything to do with that. I got to work. And I ended up going. And when I went, and I remember, to this day, I remember it like it was yesterday, walking out on the roof of the big hotel there, looking down at the track and seeing Ayrton Senna in that black Lotus he drove and the noise. And I was just like, I got to do this. And, you know, one thing led to another. And I went to a Skip Barber driving school and then bought a showroom stock car, sold my business, and went racing cars. And now it's 39 years later from that date when I started racing. So it was a long road, but I mean, I feel so lucky that I've been able to do what I love and hang out with racers and talk about racing. And now I'm in the car business because I eat, sleep, breathe, live, and love cars. And, now I just get to race home at night, but it's been a wild ride.
It sure has, man. There's so much to cover there. What led you to Skip Barber? We had Skip Barber on the podcast a couple months ago, or maybe late last year, and he was recounting how many folks kind of got their start there. What made you decide to go to Skip to get things started?
So I knew nothing about racing. And about a year earlier, we had a big hurricane and knocked all the power out. And I was the only store with generators. And I was able to pick and choose who I sold these generators to, and I did it more for favors. I never overcharged anybody. But one of them was a guy named Bob Sharp who owned a Nissan dealership.
Oh, yeah.
like 10 miles away from my bike dealership. And so he called me. I really need a generator, run my systems. Can you help me? I go, yep, I got you covered. I'll put one aside. And so I didn't know he owned a race team. I knew nothing about it. So when I'm at this Detroit Grand Prix, there was a Trans Am race going on. And I'm walking through the paddock, and he sees me, and he goes, Boris, the bike dealer, what are you doing here? I didn't know you liked racing. I go, I don't know anything about it, but Bob, and I want a Formula One car. How much are they? Where do you get one? You know, I mean, what a stupid question, right? And he took me under the tent, and he sat me down. And he goes, here, I'm going to explain to you about racing. You know, first you need to go to a school, go to Skip Barber, you know, then join the SCCA and get a showroom stock car and start racing there. And I'm like, okay, but how much is a Formula One car? So he actually mentored me that first, you know, few races when I did. So that's how I ended up at Skip Barber. Which was lucky because I knew nothing about it. And he took a kid that he barely knew that asked the stupidest question in the world, and he really took the time to explain it to me. So he was a neat guy.
Man, you've already mentioned a couple icons, Boris. And you did race a showroom stock car. Isn't that what you got started in?
Oh, yeah. I went out and went to Auto Week magazine. I thought that's the racing magazine. I found an SSGT car for sale in Detroit and flew out there and drove it home, and I drove that to the races my first year. Drove it there, put the duct tape numbers on, and that's what started my racing. And I mean, I loved it. You know, I was addicted, and that's all I wanted to do.
Do you ever miss any of those early race cars that you had? Have you ever re-encountered a race car that you drove early in your career?
Well, yeah, I got back the 89 Camaro I had that I won 3 runoffs in, and restored it, spent all the time restoring it. And now a guy named Kenny Wallace, who sponsored me, Valley Chevrolet in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, he has it. So when my son started racing, I sold it to him, and that financed my son's racing. It was Miata. Do
you ever get to drive it anymore? Does he ever have you out to do a vintage event in it or anything?
He's been inviting me back because there was a big Corvette Challenge reunion last year, and unfortunately I was at Lime Rock racing, so I couldn't do it. So hopefully this year I'll get a chance to go out and drive that again.
Oh, you got to do it, Boris. We all want to see you back in that car.
Yeah.
You mentioned you had a long history with BMW. You drove maybe one of my favorite race cars of all time, and certainly probably my favorite BMW race car, which are the E36 kind of wide body sedans and coupes that were kind of Daytona cars. I think they raced them at Le Mans too. You won a couple championships in those cars.
Yep. The E36 was a great car. And, you know, when they put the V8 and the M3 GTR, I mean, by far that was still to this day one of the best sports cars I've ever driven. And, you know, we dominated in America the first year in 01.
I know you did.
And then, you know, they made them illegal.
Yep.
And I was lucky enough, you know, BMW had nothing to do with these cars, so they couldn't race them anywhere. So they went to Nurburgring with them in the 24-hour, starting in 2003. And I became the first American to be a part of that program at Nurburgring, which is probably the best piece of road you could ever drive a car on. Anywhere in the world, there's nothing like the experience of driving fast there. And in 2005, that was my big year where I was lucky enough to be the first American to win there. That was an awesome experience.
I read that, and that's one of the many amazing highlights of your career. But have you been able to go back? Have you raced at Nürburgring again since?
Yeah, I went back in 06 and raced the privateer Porsche RSR, and then went back with Callaway in the GT Masters series. I don't remember what year, a few years ago. And then went back a few years ago with my son, and we just, you know, went around the track in a rent-a-car and looked at when you win a major race there, they put your name on a plaque. It's a big map of the track they have out front. And I mean, there's some names on there that, you know, from the 30s and up, you know, some legends. So it's cool to see your name on there.
I bet.
I showed my son that. Yeah.
I hope your son was as impressed as he should be seeing Dad's
No, not really. It was like, come on, let's go on the track.
Totally. They just let people drive their cars out there, right? Were you out there with all the other people, the unwashed masses?
It is the craziest thing. I mean, it's a free-for-all. Yeah. And, you know, anything that's street legal, you can drive. So you're out there, there's bikes going, you know, 5,000 miles an hour, and then there's motorhomes and guys with, you know, they got the racing gloves with the fingers cut out in a manta, you know, flying around. And there's a lot of guys that are really fast there. And the worst thing is when they have an accident and they close the track for an hour. You know, when it's time to go back to green, they just open the gate and it's a free-for-all. And it's unbelievable. I wish they had something like that in America, but I think there's too many lawyers.
I think you're exactly right about that.
It should be a bucket list for anybody that loves driving. I mean,
100% is on.
Best piece of road you could ever drive a car on.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's bucket list for me, and I think for a lot of folks. You mentioned on that big plaque so many famous names. If you don't mind, I'd love to chat about your pop for a little bit, who all kind of came from that era, right? Your old man had kind of an interesting racing career in those early days.
That's the funny thing. I never knew that.
Oh, interesting.
My old man, he was a deadbeat dad. He left when I was 6 and left my mother high and dry. And she worked 2 jobs, and we lived with our grandparents. And I knew he raced cars. She said he raced cars a little bit, when I started getting into it. But it was funny. I learned more about my dad the first year I started racing, because people say, oh, your dad raced, one time I raced for the Wood brothers in NASCAR, and he brought out this sheet, Leonard Wood. He goes, here's the results of the first Daytona 500 on asphalt when they built the track. And my dad was dead last. He was in that race. So it was funny that knowing nothing about him really growing up, that, I guess when they say it's in your genes, it's in your genes, because he was, I guess, an accomplished racer, but it was a little different back there. But he raced a lot in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, the deadbeat dad parts are not on Wikipedia, Boris. So,
yeah, my mother did an amazing job raising 2 kids, right? It was really tough for her. But I had a lot of people along the way that, kind of became my surrogate dad. People like Tom Milner at PTG and BMW, and Tom Gloy, and all those people kind of mentored me along the way.
Did you have any influences around you when you were young, even on the motorcycle side, people who inspired you to either be competitive or even race motorcycles or cars?
I was always competitive in nature. I didn't want to be poor. I didn't like being poor. My mother worked 2 jobs, so I didn't have a lot of adult supervision. So I hung around with the wrong kids. I did a lot of bad things as a little kid. I never thought about it so much until I had a son. But, when I was, 12 or 13 years old, I was stealing cars and robbing houses and doing things that are really bad when you think about it now. When you're 12 or 13, 14, it's like, oh, this is just fun. Totally. You're getting stuff and you're having fun, and you don't realize really what you're doing.
And then you have kids, and then it all comes back to haunt you.
It comes back to haunt you. And my lucky, call it a fork in the road was, I had a motorcycle from selling stolen goods, my mini bike. I loved riding it. That's all I did in my spare time. And one time when I was in the local motorcycle shop, when I was 14 years old, the guy looked at me and goes, hey, can you put bikes together? Are you mechanical? I go, yep, I can do anything. And he gave me a job putting bikes together and, paying me $15 a bike. And he was kind of a bully. He was a tough guy. Everybody knew their names in town. And he really straightened my ass out by making me work. When I was in school, I was there working, so I wasn't getting in trouble anymore. And I had money in my pocket then, and I could buy the things I wanted. So it really changed my life around.
Yeah, no kidding. You say you were a franchisee at 21 is wild. That's a hustler's spirit.
That's a hustler's spirit. And if that didn't happen, I probably would have been in jail. I probably would have been a career criminal, because I didn't know any better, and I didn't realize how bad I was. But I had fun my whole life. Didn't matter if I was doing good things or bad things.
But don't you think, now it's interesting you saying all that, because when I think about your racing career, that hustler spirit is there too. All these different series, all these different transitions, that must have served you really well to have to kind of bring that mentality into the racing world.
Yeah, these first guys that I worked for, Claude Sear and a guy named Morris, they taught me hard work. You just work hard. And if you want something, and that's the greatest thing about America, if you put the work in, you can accomplish anything. There's just no shortcut to glory. And so I think that early days of learning that and getting what I set a goal and obtained it, and whether it was, going from putting bikes together to become the parts manager, becoming the general manager, then to owning a dealership at a young age. When I raced bikes, it was just for fun. But when I decided I wanted to go car racing, I decided I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I need to put the work in, because when I went to my first Skip Barber, that was a funny story, because I never drove a go-kart, anything. And looking back at how I drove that 3-day school, I was an idiot. I was doing donuts and power slides, having the time of my life. And at the end of the school, I went up to the instructor, and I'm like, hey, I want to be a professional race car driver. What do I do next? And he gave me this look, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, OSB. And I go, what is that? Like a book, a tape? What is that? He goes, other sports beckon. He goes, trust me. He goes, you don't have the talent. You're too old already. You're too poor, and you're not very good. And I mean, some could say that's a dream killing move, but really I took it as that's actually great advice, and it made me really think about it. So,
Yeah.
but after doing it and seeing it, then nothing was going to stop me. I was going to just keep driving, trying to get in the fastest car I can get in. And,
Yeah.
I never said no to any car, anything. And I've had a unbelievably lucky career.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you how you kind of ended up in these various series, but maybe that's the answer to it. You never said no to any opportunity, right? Somebody came knocking and you said yes.
Yeah. And, one of my biggest breaks came, I was doing the 24 Hours Daytona in a Corvette for Kim Baker. And I was watching these two kind of European guys. They were looking at the cars, and I went over and said hello. And they were from Germany, and they were talking about building this Callaway Corvette for this German GT series. And I'm like, man, I wanted to race in Europe. I wanted to try those tracks. So I was on these guys the whole weekend like glue. I mean, I took them to the strip club, out to eat. We did everything in between a 24-hour race. And we became, we were calling on the phone. And, they were getting this car ready. And I remember after the weekend, I called Reeves Callaway from Callaway. I said, hey, this guy, Callaway Corvette, because I raced his car in the Bridgestone Supercar Series. I go, they're building a Callaway Corvette. He goes, yeah, I don't really know much about it. I'm just sending him an engine. That's it. I have nothing to do with it. I'm like, can't you get me in that car, testing or anything? And so I was bugging these guys about letting me test, and they had their driver and everything was, and I gave up after a couple months calling them. And then one day, like 3 months after I met him, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call, get woken up, and it's Reeves Callaway from Old Lyme, Connecticut. And I'm like thinking, does he not know it's 3 hours earlier in California? Can he be that stupid? But he goes, hey, I just got a call. Those guys are at the track. Their driver broke his hand in the car door. Somebody slammed the rental car door in his hand. And can you get to Germany? And luckily I had a passport. And I'm like, do you know how much a flight would cost? He goes, well, see, call me back. And I start making calls, American Airlines. Yep. I can get to Frankfurt the next morning at 7:30. I got to leave like right now, though, to get to the airport. He goes, okay, do it. And I literally jump on a plane, going to Europe for the first time, land, thinking, all right, this is before cell phones. I don't have a cell phone or anything. This is 1993. And I walk out of baggage claim thinking, I wonder what I do now. But luckily, there was a guy that didn't speak English with my name on his sign. And he gets me in the car, and we drive 2.5 hours to Zolder, Belgium, and literally get hustled around. As soon as I got there, I had to, get your gear, sign in, do all this stuff. And qualifying was just about to start. And I mean, I barely made qualifying. And that was my first race in Europe. And that ended up, after the weekend, we got so much press that they ended up bringing me back. And that really jump-started my career.
That's amazing. Was it a culture shock racing wise? Was the racing different, the driving different, or did it feel pretty natural?
What's funny is that it was very professional. There were factory teams, Porsche, Ford, Audi, BMW. But the weirdest thing to me culturally is the drivers weren't really interacting with each other.
Uh-huh.
Like Americans, we interact, we have fun, we have hate and love relationships, but we're always clowning around. And there they were very serious, and they would just, after practice, they went in the garage and closed the door. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So that was probably the biggest difference. The food sucked compared to America. So that was different. But the racing, the tracks were really, really cool and a lot of fun.
Amazing. And then you, not too long after that, ended up being part of, correct me if I'm wrong, you were in the inaugural year of Craftsman NASCAR truck racing. Isn't that right?
So when I moved to California, a friend of mine owned a company called Life's a Beach, Mark and Brian Simo, two twin brothers. And they're like, hey, man, we're going to start this company, No Fear. You want to be a part of it? And I'm like, no.
I was hoping to ask you about this too. This is all the same story, kind of?
Yeah. So I'm like, no, I want to be a race car driver. I'm working on that.
Sorry, had you been East Coast the whole time before this, Boris?
I mean, East Coast before this. And then in 1990, when they started this company, No Fear, they were like, come on, be a part of it. And I went out there and visited a few times in Southern California. The girls were hotter. The weather was better. It was just more fun. And I'm like, why do I live in Connecticut? It's kind of dreary. So I loaded up my pickup truck and just drove out there. And they started this company, No Fear. And we lived in the warehouse on rolled out fabric. We had no money. I was trying to become a race car driver, and they were trying to build this business. And when I wasn't racing, I was helping them. And we had the time of our lives. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Figuring it out, right? Just kind of making it up as you go along.
Yep. It was, that company was built on waiters and waitresses, and There was no HR department back in those days. So yeah, it was quite the. There's a really good article online called "The Rise and Fall of No Fear," and it's very accurate. And
oh, cool. We'll link to that in the podcast description. I asked colleagues what they wanted me to ask you, Boris, and everyone was like, ask him about No Fear. Everyone wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best times of our lives. And so in the Craftsman Truck Series, I started racing Trans Am, and I was racing for Ford in Trans Am. And Mark Simo, there were two twin brothers, Mark and Brian. Brian liked driving, and he raced Trans Am. Mark wanted to be a team owner, so he started a Craftsman truck team with Ernie Irvin, the NASCAR driver. And I just helped him manage that team because I knew about racing. So that's what I was doing, kind of being the go-between, managing, going to all the races I could. And, the first year there was one race, I think, or maybe it was the second year, where they didn't have enough people in the field. So I got in a truck and, took an oval track truck around Sears Point and just did a lap and pulled in. Wasn't really a start, but a start part. But then in 97, over the 2 years I was doing that, Ernie Irvin was like, how come you don't try NASCAR? And I'm like, I don't know anything about NASCAR. Or, I'm a sports car guy. I don't know anything about it.
Had you ever driven oval tracks at all, really?
No, never.
Never.
So they go to do a test at Martinsville Speedway, and Ernie goes, I'm going to put you in the truck and try it. I'm like, all right. So I get out in the truck. We have the track to ourselves. And I'm driving around, and I'm trying to drive it like a road course, and I'm horrible. And he's like, pit, come in. And I'm like, if I go in, he's not going to let me drive again. So, screw that. I'm staying out. And finally I came around. He's lying in the track. I'm like, all right, I better stop. So I stopped. And he's like, you're doing it all wrong. I go, yeah, I knew that, but I didn't want you to pull me out of the truck. So he helped me a lot. So later that year, they decided to run two trucks at one race. It was called Louisville Speedway in Kentucky. It was like a little 3/8 mile circle. And I never raced anything like that in my life. When I was done with that race, I looked like E.T. in the river at the end of the movie, where I was like, I do that every weekend because I was using so much energy, so tight, and I ended up beating their driver.
Wow.
And, so then the next year, he gave me the job of firing their driver. So
of course. Yeah, you do the hard thing first.
which was pretty bad. And he was a really good guy, Brian Reffner. But so then I started my career doing 2 years of NASCAR trucks.
Yeah.
That got me going in NASCAR.
Obviously, your skills built up. Did you grow fond of circle track racing, or are you still just a road course guy down to your core?
It's funny. I love racing, and oval racing, NASCAR is just hardcore racing. And you don't realize you're going in a circle, to be honest with you. It doesn't feel any different. You're just racing, and the racing's so close, but it's a completely different discipline than road course racing.
Of course.
And that's kind of why I became the road course teacher in NASCAR, because I understood the differences. I understood what they were doing different on the oval. And that was just like, once you show a duck water, they're going to swim. Totally. And those guys, once you showed them a few things about braking and downshifting and technique there, they were just, off and running and super fast.
I hope you never had to lay down on the front straight of Sears Point to get one of those guys to pull.
Oh, no. I would have never done that.
It's, I grew up loving sports car racing and did a little tiny bit of it myself as a young man. And later in life, moved up to rural Northern California, where all my car buddies loved circle track racing. And now I'm like addicted to it. We went to the Indy 500 last year, and I went to the Little 500 and watched those guys do 500 laps, including crazy pit stops. And it's probably the coolest racing experience I've ever seen. Right. And it's amazing. And, to your point, if you love racing, you can kind of I like drag racing. You can get attracted to all of it. Car racing, airplane racing, boat racing, all of it is great.
Right. In my house, racing's always on. And, we're coming up to the best race weekend of the year, right? Where, when we used to, all the years at BMW, we'd race Lime Rock every Memorial Day. And, Sunday was a dead day there. So you'd wake up, you'd watch Monaco Formula One, then you'd watch the Indy 500. We'd go to Sam Posey's house and watch it.
Amazing.
Then we go to the hotel and watch the Coca-Cola 600. So this year we're going to Lime Rock, and my son's racing Trans Am on Saturday. And then we're going to fly to Indy and watch the 500, live and see if Kyle Larson can win and support him there. So I'm excited about next weekend.
That's awesome. I'm jealous of that. You ended up driving NASCAR Cup cars too. Is there a big difference? I've always wanted to know this, between driving a Craftsman truck and a regular Cup car, or do they feel similar?
There was more horsepower in the in the old days, the trucks were really fast. They were 850 horsepower, 840 horsepower. Now they're dumbed down a lot. Even the Cup cars are, and the Cup cars were high 800s. So they were similar. I mean, a Cup car had more downforce, but it was really the level of competition that changed. Back then, the level of competition in Cup was, I mean, you were racing for 35th. It was just hardcore racing the whole time.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. And I loved it. I mean, the first time I found a road racing series that was like that was V8 Supercar in Australia, where it felt a lot like NASCAR, how competitive everybody was and how 10-10s all the time they were. The first time I went to Daytona, to try to run a big oval, you got a draft. And I'm following them out of the pits. And as soon as I get on the pit lane, it's just 10-10s. And I lost the draft. Then I'm out there trying to get into the draft, and they're going right by. And I mean, it's just, road racing, you're so used to, you go out there and you get everything warm, and you start building up speed. In NASCAR, it's like a light switch. As soon as it goes green, they're 10-10s. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about it.
Speaking of guys who are 10-10s all the time, didn't you race the Bathurst 1000, didn't you?
Yep.
That's a bucket list event for me, too. I'd really like to go see that.
Almost as crazy as Nurburgring, but, not as many cars, but it's still that track. When I got to go race it, I started, watching video and doing things like that. This is before simulators or anything. But when you finally show up and you look at it, TV doesn't do it justice. You're like, are you kidding me? This is steep. I mean, it's a mountain. Like, you're going down a mountain, I mean, really fast with walls all around it. And it's so much steeper in real life than, I mean, it's crazy, but it's a riot.
And pretty wild driving down there too, yes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all these guys there, I mean, they're 10-10s every day of their life. I mean, they'll have each other off and they'll wreck each other. But the coolest thing about it is, like, back then, they all had the same hospitality where you all eat lunch together. And you're like, effing, they use the C word a lot. Nah, you had me off. And then after the race, they would always go to a bar. They'd all meet there and drink and have fun. And it seemed like old school racing to me, but it was
totally. That's much closer to much closer to the American culture than the European culture that you were talking about there.
Yeah. And that's where I met SVG for the first time, and seeing that guy, how good that guy was. And, I ended up getting him that ride with Justin Marks. I talked Justin Marks into putting him in Chicago that year. So that was a pretty neat deal.
Amazing. And when does K1 go-karting come into all of this, Boris? You've had so many interesting parts of your career.
Right. So K1, they opened their first store in Carlsbad, right down the street from No Fear. And I remember seeing indoor go-karting coming soon, like, come on. And I went to look at the building. It was like buried away in an industrial park. Like, nobody's going to go to this thing. And I went in there and met them, and, they knew about racing, and I was just into it. Like, oh, man, anything you need. And they needed some help trying to get their use permit because the city wasn't being cooperative. So I helped them get letters to get that approved. And so we started to become friends because the thing was busy from the time they opened the doors. And so when they opened their second one, they asked me if I wanted to invest. So I invested an amount of money in that. And then my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, was really happy about it because I used to always keep one suit for every car I ever raced. And I must have had 200 suits in the house. They were in every cupboard. They were everywhere. And she was so mad. So when they started opening K1 Speeds, they would take all my stuff and all my memorabilia. And it was a great place for that. And so I was a partner at K1 for 18 years. And just about a year ago, I sold out. He had an opportunity to bring in a big investor that wanted 49% of the company. So, there was 4 owners of K1 and 3 of us sold out a year ago. So it was a neat ride. It was a really cool company. And, the guy's done an unbelievable job with it.
That's amazing. So it was happenstance again. It really, listening to you talk about these stories, so many things are coming from you just having kind of an open mind and being a go-getter. I mean, I love racing. I love hanging around with people that like racing, that like cars. So really, I just networked my area I was in. I mean, there's the people you meet and become your friends. And, like David Denglard, we were, 18 years. I didn't do much in that business, but it was a great place to put all my stuff. My wife said, all your shit. And it's still there now. I have cars there, suits there, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. It occurs to me, yeah, that you've had all these encounters with people who have really helped open doors for you. Are there other, I don't know if mentors is the right word, but other names or people who really helped you along in your career or gave you advice, even about things outside of racing that kind of influenced you or opened doors for you?
Well, I mean, the last 15 years, it would be Rick Hendrick,
Yeah.
If somebody told me that I would be partners with Rick Hendrick 20 years ago, I'd say, you are smoking dope. There's just no way, no chance. My racing career at BMW, I was really, really close with a guy named Tom Purvis, who was the president of BMW for a long time in America and loved racing. I mean, he was such a great guy. He's retired now, living in Britain. But, we started talking about, what are you going to do when you're done racing? And when we were talking about it, it was 2004. And I'm like, well, I'm not done yet. I still got a lot of years left. What, are you kidding me? And he said, well, what about a car dealership? So he would send me car dealerships for sale in, Texas and in New Orleans and places like that. I'm like, man, Tom, I grew up in Connecticut and I'm a Southern California guy now. I'm not moving.
Yep.
And I go, how about in Temecula Valley in California? There isn't a Highline dealership. Why don't we put a BMW dealer there? And so we talked about it for 4 years, and then they finally awarded me the point. And everybody told me, man, you get this point, you hire a GM, it's just like printing money. It's so easy. And when it got closer, it was a lot of money and everything I've made in racing and then some. And I'm like, if I screw this up, I'm screwed for my life.
Yeah.
I've been working so hard to get there. So one time I was walking to the grid at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and I had never met Rick Hendrick. I used to, give no fear clothes to his son, Ricky. He was a great kid. And he was walking by me and he goes, hey, Boris. I'm like, hey, Mr. Hendrick. And he goes, met a friend of yours. He was talking really good about you. And I'm like, oh, who's that? And he goes, Tom Purvis from BMW. I go, oh, well, next time you tell him I want my dealership. And this is before that. He goes, you're trying to get in the car business? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, if you ever need any help, call me. Right.
Wow.
And he gave me the card to his assistant, Christian Smith. And so one day I decided when I was getting close and I was scared and I didn't know what to do, I called him and I said, hey, I'm going to be in town, day after tomorrow, just by chance, in Charlotte. And I went there and met him. And, we basically came up with a deal on a piece of paper in like 10 minutes. And he's just the greatest guy I've ever met. And probably, the last 14 years, I mean, his organization has taught me the car business, but, I have his cell phone. I call him once a week. I've asked him the stupidest questions he's probably ever gotten in his life, right? I'm probably his biggest pain in the ass, but he's helped me a lot. And he's definitely the number one guy that's helped me out.
That's great. I'm glad we got to talk about him a little bit. What are you doing in terms of racing these days, Boris?
Well, I mean, I raced last week in Trans Am because there was a big issue on Saturday and the kid didn't show up Sunday to race the car. So I started from the back without any practice. But I still love racing the Trans Am cars. And I go to all the races because my son races. He's 21. Sure. And I'll race a few TA1 races this year. And I'm working on a big project right now, trying to build a racetrack out here in Southern California.
No kidding.
Yep. Kind of a country club model racetrack, 300 members. But it's right here in Southern California in Lake Elsinore. And so
we need them. We've lost some tracks down there, so we need a couple more down there.
Yep. It's a really fun project. I'm working with a company called Tilke in Germany. They engineer a lot of the Formula One tracks.
Oh, yeah. That's the famous guy who designs all those tracks. Yeah. Oh, man. That's cool.
Yeah. And they're like total professionals. And so we're hopefully going to break ground in a year and a half.
Wow. Congratulations, man. That's really exciting. Yeah. Is that going to have residences on it, that kind of thing?
It's going to have like really nice garages where you can show off your car collection.
Oh,
a little living space above. So
yeah, okay.
Not really. I think where it is so close to Orange County, LA, San Diego, that people just drive there. They don't need to fly there, and they might stay overnight. They'll have a little place for that. But I'm going to limit it to 300 members. But we'll still do things like rent to race teams, testing, things like that.
That's great. I think that's the right spot. I hear of more and more from people who are into racing that's the kind of setup they're looking for. People out at Spring Mountain and the place out by Palm Springs and all those.
The problem is they're in the middle of nowhere.
Totally.
This is you can just drive there. I mean, Spring Mountain's a really cool track, but I mean, you talk about nowhere. It's nowhere.
Pahrump. It's tough. My buddy's got a house out there, but I'm like, man, I love Vegas, but that's even way out there. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask at least one or two questions from our mutual buddy, Colin Comer. He told me to ask you specifically about your foray into aviation. I saw on your VTA user account you bid on an Aviat Husky. Are you a pilot, Boris?
Yeah. So when I sold out of K1, I was always into aviation. And a year and a half ago, I bought a plane. It was really cool. Got to fly over with the ferry pilot from France in this little turboprop plane. It was
What?
really
You flew
cool.
across the North Atlantic?
Yeah, we went like from France to Scotland. Then from Scotland, you go to Iceland, spend the night in Reykjavik, Iceland, which is a really cool place. And then from there, you go to Greenland. And from Greenland, we make it all the way to Maine. So it's pretty much the way the bombers went when they were going
Totally
across. And it was a really fun trip. So
did you have to wear the exposure suit and everything?
Yeah.
When you're,
when you go across the water, you're wearing this big survival suit. And the only thing you have in the back is a raft. But when you're flying over those iceberg-infested waters, I mean, if you went down there, nothing would help you. There's nobody out there. Yeah.
Oh, man. It makes you think of Charles Lindbergh and those people doing that almost 100 years ago,
It's
out there on their own.
Great. I don't know how they did it. We're doing it with GPS and autopilot, and, it's just pushing buttons. They had to actually stay awake and look out the window. Yeah, it's nuts.
Totally.
Yeah.
So you're flying a turbine already, Boris. That's awesome.
Well, so I have a professional teaching pilot with me. I was originally going to keep him a year, but I think safety-wise, it's good to have two people up front, and my family and everyone's with me. So, yeah, I love aviation, love flying.
That's awesome, man. I wish you'd won that Husky. A little aerobatic plane out there in Eastern California would be fun.
Yeah, I am a big fan. I watch all the Alaskan videos of them landing anywhere.
Totally.
And that's definitely my next purchase.
Yeah, growing up there out in the desert, a lot of guys, would have a big balloon-tired tail dragger sitting out behind their house. That's cool stuff. That'd be good in Utah too, man.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. You said you and Colin are brewing up a business. What do you got going on there?
Well, I mean, we're taking the idea from Bring a Trailer. I mean, Bring a Trailer is like, it's funny, me and my friends were playing golf yesterday. We were like, what's the first thing you do when you get to work? Yeah, we go look at car porn on Bring a Trailer. I mean, that's the first website I open every day now, just to see what you guys got. And it's such a cool idea. So Colin came up with the idea with a couple friends, and I'm not really doing anything with it, but I'm one of the early investors, and it's going to be like Bring a Trailer. It's called Dirt Hammer, but we're just going to concentrate on side-by-sides and ATVs, a place where people can buy and sell their stuff, which is, I can't believe no one's done it yet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You guys have done. You've rewritten the rules. I mean, it's just, but your stuff is so cool on there. I mean, it's not.
What kind of stuff do you find checking out your user account? I don't think I'm blowing up your spot. It's just your name. You want a dirt bike. You've bid on some other interesting stuff. Like I said, you bid on that airplane. Do you find yourself just all over the place, or do you have specific things you're looking at?
My wife always drives a demo, but she wanted a car, and I go, "What do you want?" So we bought it on Bring a Trailer, and it's a 1977 F-250 with a 460 in it. So it's like a farm truck. And that's one of her cars that she loves driving.
That's great. She just use it for fun, or does she drive it around to actually go places?
No, it's for fun. She'll drive it on the weekends, and she's like a self-proclaimed farmer. We have like animals and ducks and donkeys and stuff, and she has a big garden, so she likes to use it for all that stuff. But it's perfect. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, big long bed Ford from the 70s is great. I'm looking at it right now. It's a great looking truck.
Yeah.
What else is on the list? You got other things you're checking out?
I mean, we've been checking out a lot of stuff, a lot of memorabilia. There's some really cool stuff I haven't gotten that I've tried to get. But I mean, every day I look at that site.
Have you hung on to a lot of your own memorabilia? You said you had some of it at K1 back in the day. Is there anything you wish you had back if you let things go that you wish you'd kept?
Not really. Not really. I mean, I have almost every suit I ever raced in, at least one of them, around. They're all over the place, but I don't really have them on display anywhere. My car dealership looks like a Boris Said shrine, and the K1 store in Anaheim looks like a Boris Said shrine. Kind of ridiculous, but it's cool stuff. My office is like that. I mean, you collect a lot of stuff when you're racing over the years.
I'm sure.
My wife says I'm pack rat, but I don't think so. I like the stuff.
Did she want you to get rid of some of it, or has she made peace with all the stuff?
Well, she's okay. She made peace with it, I think.
That's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you doing this, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any other things that the BAT community should know about?
No, I mean, I'm just like everyone else on the site. I just like cars. I like all different cars. I keep looking at these Formula One scale models, thinking, man, that would be
there's
cool.
a bunch of them coming out right now.
Yeah, and I'm like, man, I could put that on the wall in my house in Utah.
Totally.
Pretty cool. So
Totally up on that's how I like them mounted. When they stick them up on the side of the wall. Yeah,
badass. So
yeah,
but it's just a lot of cool stuff on your site, and I mean, it was a great vision, and you guys really brought it out. I mean, it works fantastic.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and it's interesting hearing you talk about your story of being involved in all these businesses early on. It really rings true to me, right? Because we've had to kind of make this up and have had to figure it out, and that's actually kind of the funnest thing about starting something is figuring it out and making it up.
But it shows. I mean, a lot of people have great ideas, but to get it across the finish line, and you can tell that everyone at your place has a passion for it.
Absolutely,
stuff that's on there. It's just that's the same passion I have for it, and it's really cool. And it shows.
I know you're not. Yeah, I know you're not going to believe it, Boris. I am not a professional podcaster. This is a side gig that comes when I'm not helping make this whole thing tick. So
that's cool. It makes two of us.
Making it up as we go. I've been staring at your sign there behind your head, which I love. Do what you said you'd do, when you said you would do it, and the way you said you would do it. That's like such car guy stuff.
That's
I love
lost art. It was really cool though. We were racing in Coda last year, and my son's a foodie, so he picked this restaurant. We go there, and the valet guy goes, "If you look around, you might see Joe Rogan in there tonight." We're like, "Joe Rogan's here?" And he wouldn't say anything. And sure enough, we go in there and we walk right by him. He's eating with his wife, at dinner at the booth. And so we're eating, and I'm like, man, I want to just go up and say, man, I'm a big fan of your work. I love his podcast. Like, that's the podcast king, right? And so after dinner, I get up to go to the bathroom, and you walk down this long hallway. And when I came out of the bathroom, there was Joe Rogan, kind of hunched in the corner on the phone. And I'm like, I went back in the bathroom like, shoot, he's on the phone. I can't bug him.
Yeah.
So then I just walked out and went by him, didn't say a word. And as I got to the end of the hallway, I run into this guy, a friend of mine named Kevin Kent, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, a total badass, a lot of tours over in Iraq. I'm like, hey, Kevin, what are you doing here? He goes, what are you doing here? We're talking, my kids racing, blah, blah, blah. Our kids used to swim together, his two kids, and known each other forever. I go, what are you doing here? He goes, oh, I'm Joe Rogan's bodyguard. I'm like, no kidding.
No
right? And so we're talking, and then Joe Rogan walked out, and we got to meet him, and he was a super nice guy.
He's a car guy, isn't he? I think he got Porsches and stuff like that. I think he likes cars.
Yep. A lot of Porsches. And I think he has a Singer on order. And,
man.
It's his trick. And we just picked up our Singer, me and my son. We split.
We got what color did you do? People are getting pretty wild with the builds these days.
They call it Moonstone Silver is what they named it.
Oh, I know that color. Yeah.
And then we did, the interior is mostly all black and all carbon fiber. So it's a pretty neat car. We just got it like a week ago.
They're a stunner. You guys gonna drive it around? You gonna take it on road trips? What's your plan for it?
We're just gonna drive the shit out of it. Worry about that later, the rest of it. But yeah.
That's the right attitude to have. Maybe that's the perfect place to end, Boris. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you doing this. I know all the members of our community are going to appreciate you sharing all your stories with us. So really appreciate it. And thanks for using the website too, man. It was nice hearing all the positive things you had to say.
Cool. Take care.
Cheers. And thanks to all of you for listening. Please send any feedback, questions, concerns to podcast@bringatrailer.com, and we'll catch you next time.